What happened here? Some questions don't have good answers.
There's a lot of soldiers out there, and there's only 4 of us.
We are talking about the movie Overlord, 2018 Nazi zombie movie. This one is directed by Julia Avery, produced by J.J. Abrams, and stars really a whole host of TV actors. Jovan Adepo has a whole host of TV credits. You've got the guy who plays Euron Greyjoy, the the main Nazi bad guy. You've got Ian DeCasca, who you may know from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And the story focuses on a small group of American troops as they are parachuted out of a plane into occupied France to take out, their mission is to take out this radio tower to so the D-Day landings can happen ultimately. So they're on obviously they lose a lot of their company. There's only a handful of them left, and actually the first act of the movie is really just these guys trying to, overcome the landmines, the terrain, Nazis and stuff like that, and get this ragtag group together. And then they uncover this. Old church, which has been occupied by the Nazis, and they may well be doing some type of strange experiments on the locals and on dead soldiers, creating a undead army. So it's up to a small group of Americans plus a French whom they meet along the way to try and defeat the undead Nazi menace. Now, there are quite a lot actually of zombie Nazi films, but I would say this movie is most like the movie Army of Frankensteins. Less so than the things like the Outpost series and even Dead Snow. It's more like Army of Frankenstein. I recently also reviewed one called Trench 11, which is actually a World War I movie, and again, it's more similar to that. So, what works and what doesn't work with this movie? We'll go over the positives first of all. So it's nice to see, essentially, what is a B-movie have some a little bit of a higher production value on it. Because make no mistake, this movie is a schlocky B-movie, but man is it fun. So the production value here looks fantastic. I mean, just the the set pieces, it's all almost like a, I don't know how to best describe it, a hyper-reality, if that makes sense. So it almost feels like a video game. I mean, this ultimately is Wolfenstein, the movie. So it's doesn't quite feel like it's quite realistic, which may put people off. But nonetheless, it feels like you're playing a video game, but a fun one. The cast, I think, do an excellent job here. Yeah, the characters may be a little bit broad, but I think everyone does a good job here of really giving you distinct personalities and really making you warm or hate their personality depending on who they are. I thought that was good. And it may be a small thing, but I like it when people speak native tongue in there. So we have French people speaking French, we have German people speaking German, rather than English with a German accent and stuff like that. But it's maybe one of these things that doesn't bother some people, but I prefer it. This movie is absolutely action-packed. There's a lot more of actual Americans versus Nazis in this film than I was expecting. It's almost more of an action film than a horror, to be quite honest. But there's some really well-shot, well-choreographed set pieces. And this movie does not skimp out on the violence, let me tell you. This movie is pretty gory. And there are some a high body count as you'd probably expect with a war film. But there's some really they don't move away from showing you the effects ultimately of what gunfire and mortar shells and things like that can do. There are some really beautiful shots, but disturbing. So when we get our protagonists parachute down into rural France, we just see dead soldiers on parachutes hanging through the trees. And this is before anything supernatural happens. It's a really eerie atmosphere. And the actual location shooting here of this French village and this very ominous Gothic-looking castle looks fantastic. Then we actually get to the supernatural stuff, which was handled pretty well, and they don't tell you too much about what's going on, but I think it works. We basically know they're doing some type of experiment and it's causing various kind of mutations and stuff like that. There is a little bit of a contradiction, but we'll come on to that. But nonetheless, the effects here look all very good and gooey. So overall, the positives are going to far outweigh the negatives. But are there any negatives? Like I've said, my negatives are relatively minor. The characters are a little bit broad. The story is kind of silly. This is not going to be for everyone, but if you like films that are on this channel, then you like this movie. Let me put it like this. But if you are a serious kind of war movie fan, you know, if you like things like Thin Red Line, then you're going to find this junky kind of schlocky trash. But if you like kind of like sci-fi horror, then there's a lot to enjoy here. But I can understand why some people may just pass this off as being kind of silly. There are a few moments when kind of CGI, those CGI effects look a little bit jarring. They don't have so much to the CGI blood, but there's just a few instances where they'll kind of like add CGI to certain things. It kind of looks a little bit obvious in places. But I've got to be honest with you, I thought this movie was a lot of fun. Yeah, I mean, it is a full-on B movie, but man, is it a lot of fun. I actually would recommend this movie. If you watch this channel, then I would recommend this movie to pretty much anyone who regularly watches this channel, because I pretty much guarantee you'll like it. There's absolutely loads going on, likeable kind of characters, you know, Nazis that are absolute bastards and kind of like, you know, you can kind of, you want them to kind of see them get their comeuppance, etc. There's maybe less supernatural stuff here than you might be expecting. This is the last thing I'll say. This movie has far more human on human action than human on Nazi violence, human versus kind of zombies. I feel some people may be disappointed where we don't get a lot of the zombies. Almost, it's almost like they're kind of, it's the threat of it rather than they're the actual threat themselves, if that makes sense. There are obviously kind of like undead experiments in it, but they're not in it as much as you're going to think. So bear that in mind. So overall, I will say I really, really enjoyed this movie. I'm going to check out, make sure there's a steelbook that I can pre-order for it, and definitely get it. I might even watch Army of Frankensteins again, because it's just kind of, it's put me in the mood for it. So I have to say I would recommend this movie quite a bit. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's an absolute gut-busting thrill ride. I would recommend it to anyone who watches this channel. Few minor like quibbles here and there, but overall, I'm going to give this movie an 8 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.